Welcome back to the farm. Brandy and I are out here watching what my friend Christy used to call a little cowboy television. I guess that's what she called a campfire. We got a little bonfire going. Finally able to burn some of our brush. We got some moisture yesterday, so we're going to burn this pile up. We got those trees that we had cut earlier in the garden all cleaned up and piled up out here out back. Brandy likes chasing the ashes. So this is going to burn probably half the day. So we're going to have to keep around and keep an eye on it. But I thought it would be a good day to update you all on some of the past projects we've done. I know it's frustrating that sometimes you don't see the end result when we do little projects, like the wicking beds that we did and the little redneck hydroponics that we did in the window. But we'll give you an update on those today, and we'll take a walk through the greenhouse. We'll maybe show you around the garden a little bit and tell you what our plans are for that. So let's get this thing ripping and we'll do a little walk around. Got a pretty good burn, nice and clean. Kelly's home today. Hi, babe.
Hi, babe.
We're gonna let this burn down a little bit and we're gonna take a little trip later. But I'll do those things I promised for you here real quick here in a minute. What do you think of this stuff, Brandy? Kelly volunteered to watch the fire for me for a bit, so as promised, I'll take you around and show you what we got going on. As you can see, we got those trees cleaned up out of the garden. I just got to whittle on them stumps a little bit with a chainsaw, and then we're going to get a stump grinder guy to come out, and we probably got 20 little stumps we need to grind down so we don't hit them when we're mowing. And we got a little pile of firewood timber here that I can cut up as I need wood in the shop. But things are greening up real nice. We'll have to bush hog this down here within a month or two. Did this little project a while back. There was an old swing set we found in a bunch of the junk out behind the grain bin we were cleaning out, and I had this swing that we'd brought on the move. There was no real good tree to hang that in, so I cut this swing set down and hung my swing in it, and it's soon becoming my favorite spot. When this tree leaves out, I'll be hanging up there quite a bit, admiring my freshly manicured lawn and rehydrating. So let's go back to the greenhouse. Got my tomato plants started in there and they're doing really well. Got a fan going in here. I'll shut it off so I can talk with you. Wow, that's nice. Those of you that have a greenhouse will understand there is absolutely nothing like walking into a greenhouse, even on an overcast day like this. It's very nice in here. It's probably 40 degrees outside and we're at 70 degrees in here. Like walking into a little summer paradise. So those are the tomatoes we planted the other day. And we've got them under 2 heat lights here plugged into that thermal cube, so when it gets down to freezing, we've had a couple nights in the last week or so that got down into freezing, but these are almost ready to transplant. You see, we planted them kind of densely in those cups, but we'll dump them out of those cups and each individual plant will have its own cup here pretty soon. My elderberry, I brought it out of the house, if you remember, and it got up to like 120 degrees in here one day before I was able to get out here and take care of business, and it burned it back a little bit. So I still got some green on it, so I'm hoping that's going to come back. The blackberry's starting to sprout a little bit. And I got some sprouts coming on Hallie's rose there. So, yeah, the greenhouse is doing well. I really love it. This will be full of tomato plants here real quick. The vents up here are working really well. If it gets too hot in here, I open that window behind the fan and open the window on the door here. The reason I'm not too concerned about those elderberry cuttings is when I got the cuttings, I brought a stick over here and I just stuck it in the ground. Actually, 2 of them here, and they're sprouting. So I have a nice elderberry bush here by the rain gauge. That last rain gave us about 1.25 inches. Pretty nice. We were getting to a point out here in central Nebraska where we're almost needing to water the lawn and stuff. And we'd actually been watering some plants we'd planted. But anytime you get about 1 inch of rain, you don't have to worry about watering for a while. We found some more combination panels for the garden, for the deer fence. So we picked up those the other day with some T-posts we found for $1 a piece. The panels were only $10 a piece. They're $40 at the store. So definitely use Facebook Marketplace. You can really find some deals on there on stuff, and you're not paying the retail price. So we picked up a couple different raspberries that we planted kind of in line with the hydrant up here, so they're not in the way when we start doing stuff out in the garden. I'll take you a little tour over here. We had the fortunate visit from Leland the other day. Came out, our previous owner, and he showed me some more stuff that's planted out here that I had no idea we had. This is a black currant, and you can see it's already starting to kick it off this spring. I took the apple wood and piled it up there on the hill out of the way, because when I get my smoker built, that's going to be good cooking wood there. So got a little more sticks to pick up here over by the trees. But there's a couple more raspberry plants out here that I was unaware of, and I would have tilled under if he hadn't showed up and let me know. The rhubarb is coming up, and this is green rhubarb. And we'll can up some of that when we get our strawberries going. This is a red gooseberry starting to get going also. It's got some green going on it. We're going to have to get some little weeding program going out here pretty soon. We'll get some mulching going on. This whole line here that you see, I was unaware also, is all asparagus. So that's a perennial vegetable. If you didn't know, it comes back every year. So I'll show you a little finger coming up there. You can see that? We'll have a bunch of those coming up all down this line here pretty quick. So we got our 2 apple trees here. I pruned this one back quite a bit, and I apologize for the wind. The wind's kicking up if you're hearing that in the microphone. But this one here was laid on the ground, so I'm going to try to make a tree out of it again. I cut off everything that was laying on the ground. And that tree there is a monster apple tree. But we're going to put away plenty of apples. We picked up those IBC totes. There's 4 of them for absolutely free. The farmers out here get fertilizer in them, and they don't take them back. So they're trying to get rid of them frantically out here. Everybody's paying like $100 a piece for these things in the city. But they are free of charge out here in farmland. 2 more apple trees needed some extensive pruning this year because they had been let go just a little bit. Leland, I mentioned him before, that lived out here. He was getting up in age, and this was a lot for him to do. His wife had passed on, and he was doing all this stuff by himself. So it was getting to be too much. So we've taken it on, and we've told him that we're going to continue on here and make him proud. This is a wild cherry, this mess that you see here. And we're going to get in here maybe tomorrow, but soon. My brother's coming up on Friday. Maybe I'll enlist his help. But we're going to cut this way back down just to below ground level and leave a couple good trunks in there so we see what it's going to do. And if I'm not impressed with it and it's not a nice looking plant, or we don't get some pretty blooms on it or something, it's probably going to go away because it blocks the morning sun to the greenhouse. Not a lot, but once it gets leafed out, it will. But if I'm not real impressed with it next year, that will be gone. The grain bin right there, that's going to be moved, as I stated before. We're going to make a project out of that, a little gazebo over in the backyard area to kind of entertain in when we have company and it's nice weather. And then this kind of raised area here, I'm going to put in a couple little corrals for some animals. If I buy either a hog or a small steer to feed out that I can slaughter here on the homestead, this will be a couple little pens for them here where I can feed them out. But when that bin's gone, Kelly's chicken coop's going to go right here, and she's got in mind about an 8x16 inner chicken coop with a run yard out here. And then once things are done in the garden out here in the fall, I can make a little connective tunnel out here to the garden where we can turn the chickens loose out there to scratch around and eat some leftovers. We planted a couple new trees. This here is a peach that is frost hardy for Nebraska. It will grow, but if you get a late freeze when it's blossoming, you may not get any fruit that year, but every now and then you'll get lucky. And this is a pear. Eventually when the stump grinder guy comes, I want to take this stump way down, and we're going to plant another fruit tree there to kind of continue this line of fruit. And we're going to do the same thing over there. We're going to plant some fruit trees in that line, and I'm hoping when I do the spacing that those stumps aren't right where I need to put a tree, because I don't want to grind those clear down into the ground. Maybe I can, you know, put one here and then one here. Hopefully it works out. My backstop, my target backstop, I'm going to actually move back side of where we're burning back there. That's kind of going to be my gun range up there. This plastic, everybody around here is pretty skeptical whether it's going to survive Nebraska, but it's 6 mil. We had a real good hailstorm the other day that we drove through, and it survived. There's no holes in it anywhere. I think it's pliable enough to where the hail just kind of bounces off of it. And in this spot here, I'm going to put a walk-through man door here, or woman door, whoever walks through it, because the entrances are around on the front, those big sliding doors. And anybody in Nebraska will tell you, you don't put entrances on the north side of the buildings, because that's a lot of times where your weather comes in. So once I get that in, I don't have to open these big doors. There's 2 big doors out here to get into the shop. And I'm planning on taking these concrete pads out on both sides, because we have a gentle slope out here, but it's kind of flat up here. So I'm going to take those out, and I'm going to take this grade down a little bit right here so there's more of a sloping away from the shop, because when we get heavy snow and ice, the bottom of that door freezes if you don't keep it perfectly clear like I have been towards the latter part of winter, and you can't get the darn door open. And all the water, there's no gutter, runs right off, puddles down there, and ices up overnight. And if you want to work in the shop, you got to chip ice, and that's no fun. So that new 0-turn lawnmower that we purchased is already paying off out here. You can see we got quite a bit of grass all up around the house, and that driveway gets mowed up there when it gets overgrown, and then this goes around the corner behind the shop, gets mowed. So it's quite a bit of grass. So that thing is worth its weight in gold. We planted some strawberry crowns out here in the flagpole garden, or garden box. Got some green showing up. We had 3 inches of snow out here yesterday morning, but by noon it looked like this again. You know the old saying, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. That is no more true any place than here in Nebraska. Other people like to use that term, but it fits this place perfectly. This is Hallie's rose here, or they call it the Nelson rose. In Hallie's book that I read that she wrote here, if you didn't hear on the other videos, she was a published author. That was Leland's mom. And she wrote a book. Let me get over here behind the blue spruce so we get out of the wind. She wrote a book called South of the Cottonwood Tree. Really good book. I recommend it if you can find it. The only one I saw on like eBay was like 80 bucks. But they had it at the local library here. But I guess her and her sister had a saying that maybe was passed down from somebody older than them. But on the western side of their property, growing up, there was a cottonwood tree. And if there was a storm coming in, and I'll have to reread the book to remember which side of the tree was the problem and which side wasn't. But if the storm was south of the cottonwood tree, I think the term was you were okay. But if the storm was north of the cottonwood tree, you were going to get hit. So when they would talk later on in life, they would ask, well, is it south of the cottonwood tree or north? When they would talk about the weather. But that's Hallie's rose, and back to that story. She took that rose wherever they moved to in their lifetime. She would always bring this rose with her. So everywhere she lived, she had this rose. And Leland tells me that this rose blooms every year on his brother's birthday, which is kind of peculiar. Pretty neat. So we got a bunch of lilacs down there in those cages. They're coming on pretty good. I believe Kelly said this was a lilac too, starting to green up. The peonies are going crazy. I wish those were asparagus. We'd be eating good. But they're growing up good. Leland said the deer eat these down to the nub, but I think Brandy's keeping the deer out of the yard pretty well this year. She stays on patrol. All right, let's go up and check out our little redneck aquaponics project that we did. And I'll bring you up to speed on that, and we'll look at the wicking beds too up here by the house. Oh, before we get up to the house, this rose here is actually called the Tiff rose. It's not its official name, but Leland's wife, Pat Tiff, who has passed on, she had a similar story. This was her favorite rose, and she took it wherever she moved to. So it's starting to green out pretty nicely. Got a lot of history on this place, and that's what we really like. We're going to try to honor the history and keep things going. So here's our wicking beds. They're doing very well. So far I'm very impressed with them. This one here has kale in the back and some spinach here in the front. The spinach is already starting to get its true leaves. So we'll have a nice little patch of greens here. And then over in this one has parsnips and carrots. They take a little bit longer to come up, but you can see they're starting to sprout. And they'll be looking good, squared away here pretty soon. And if you didn't see the video, these are really nice little projects. They got water reservoirs in the bottom that you fill from these pipes. And little overflow holes when it's full. So you can't overwater, but you don't have to water all the time, which is kind of a headache if you're having to water your pots. Anybody that grows in pots knows that pots dry out very quickly. These nice lush green plants here are called naked ladies. It's a bulb. I guess they green out really nicely, and just about when you think they're done, they send up these shoots and have really beautiful flowers on them. Just on the top. That's why they call them naked ladies, because there's not much else to them. And we got some hostas coming back here. We planted a little raspberry vine here called a raspberry shortcake. It's thornless, and it makes a nice little bush, and it's supposed to be very prolific producing, and it will kind of mask the hydrant here. I wanted to plant something here. And that's my goal around here. A lot of stuff that's planted is just kind of here and there and almost in the way sometimes. So I like to plant things where they're not in the way, where you're already going around something. Like the end of the fence down there, that's where I want to put Hallie's rose when I get it established, right on the corner of that fence. So I'm already having to go around that anyway, so it's not in the way. But we had Easter out here in the backyard. Beautiful time back here. We had the volleyball net set up and had a great time. We have a local lady that paints propane tanks. So once the weather gets good, we're going to have her come out here and paint some nice stuff on the propane tank out there. So here's an update on our redneck hydroponic system up here. Doing very well. You can see the roots are clear down into the water down in there. So you don't have to worry about the water level in there so much once that happens. And the mint, I think, has got some roots down in there. The thyme's doing good. You remember I sowed these pretty thickly if you watched the video. And look at the rosemary over here. Only one little shoot came up. So I'm glad I put extra seeds in there. The cilantro's looking really good. Got to thin this peppermint out quite a bit. But I've already used some basil off of there. There was twice as much basil in there. It sprouted really well. Thyme will be catching up here pretty soon. But pretty little window garden. I fertilize them about every 2 weeks. I put a quarter teaspoon of Miracle-Gro in the bottom, and I refill the water. Make sure if you do this, don't refill the water all the way up to the pot. Keep it just below the pot so there's an air space in there so those roots will air prune themselves. So that's it for us on the homestead for now. We got some big things coming up though, and we'll keep you guys posted what's going on. I'm going to go up and check the fire out and sit with Kelly for a minute. And when it burns down enough, we're going to take a trip over to a little place we like going to called the Secret Garden. And it's about probably 30 minutes north of us here, maybe 25. But they do a nice little lunch on some Saturdays, and a little boutique place we like going to. So until next time, come on back to Mark Kelly Farms and check us out. If you want to keep up with our videos, make sure you like it. And if you think any of your friends will benefit from our recipes or our homestead advice or anything like that, go ahead and share it with them. But stay safe, stay healthy. God's looking down on me right now. Sun, come on out. Bye-bye, y'all.